Thank you, Shannon. No, actually, I was very excited to do it. It was a process that I enjoyed. It was daunting at first, as she described, to think about pulling it together, and as I got to see a few examples of some other companies and what they'd done. And at that point, I'd been with Devin a whole year, a whole year. So I probably had a few questions myself about what all the pieces were. So that's one point. Another point is I don't have any functional responsibility for our ethics program. So I didn't own any of it. I was familiar with it. I benefited from having worked with Gary actually prior to that at OG&E on that ethics program and learned a lot from that process and knew how important it was to the organization. Devin was one of the founding members of the OK Ethics organization that was Shannon's brainchild and that she's brought to life and has done really well and has made a huge contribution, I think, to our business community. And as such, I saw that Devin had not won the Compass Award, and so I'm a person of questions. And I thought, well, why? Why haven't we? What's the deal? What's it about? And that type of thing. So I'm super curious. Some might even say nosy. But so that probably drove me a little bit to dig into it, and thought, well, we ought to at least look at it. No credit to me at all in reality, because Devin does have a lot of good programs and processes and tools and leadership attributes and leaders in place that really already existed. I didn't create a thing. I simply went on my journey of discovery, of learning what all of that was and how it all fit together, and then picked up, found those pieces to be able to tell the story and fit it into the application form. So I felt really honored to do that. And then, being fortunate enough to actually have won the award was just the topper for that, because as others have already said, the process was something that was very meaningful. And I think for every company, no matter how big or how small you are, no matter how long your company's been around or if it's a startup, there's something in this process to be learned about what do ethics really mean? We all believe we're ethical, and we are, but how do you put systems and processes in place in an organization so that everybody kind of knows what that means in terms of expectations, and then how do you put things into place so that it's sustainable? Gary will likely talk about tone at the top. That's some words you hear a lot when you hear people talk about ethics. The leadership of any organization will set the tone, and they have to continue to do that and actively do that. But how do you make it sustainable? Because leadership changes, and you'll choose the right leaders, but how do you make it a sustainable, consistent part of the culture of your organization? And I think the structure of this application, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that helps you understand what pieces might be necessary to do that. Before we get started too much, I would really insist, I was going to say I would really love, but no, I insist, that each of you introduce yourselves, and you don't have to stand up and turn and face the group and tell us who you are and who you're with, if you don't mind. We'll start over here. Well, let's kick it off. If you wouldn't mind picking up your workbook, we're really just going to be walking through this. This is going to be a crutch for Gary and I think, today, to just kind of share some examples and thoughts with you about the Compass Award. But we really don't want this to be a lecture. I really encourage you to ask questions at any time. You will get much more out of it if you do that. I will feel much less pressure if you do that. And it's really important that I don't feel that pressure. So if you look at that first, it's page 2, but just kind of show you the agenda that we'll be walking through here today. We're going to talk a little bit more about the benefits of the Compass Award. And then we're going to look at that application process, and we've got just excerpts from it in the book that we'll delve into a little bit. That will include some examples that Gary and I have shared and included in your workbook, because a lot of this is not just check the box, yes we do that, yes we do that, we're the best. It is showing examples and being able to demonstrate exactly how that works, and that's what those exhibits will do for you. So we'll talk a little bit about the application process, that it is built on the Malcolm Baldrige Award. We'll go through the sections as you see there, and then a little bit at the end talk about how applications are evaluated, and that's probably something that I can speak to just a little bit. I've been experienced just one time with that, but Shannon could probably elaborate a lot more on that, and certainly can respond to questions throughout as well, since she's been here from the beginning and knows the intent and how it's evolved and grown. become even better over time. So with that, any questions before we kind of kick it off? And we're just going to do a tag team. I'm just going to talk a little bit, and then I'm going to throw it to Gary, and he's going to say, well, I don't know, it's my turn now. But again, anytime, ask a question. If you want an elaboration on anything we have, or if we're just not covering something that you'd like to have information about. So with that, if you go ahead and turn over to page 3, and some of this I'm certainly not going to read it to you, but it does give you the background a little bit and what the original intent and purpose of this award is. It does have a higher purpose, you know, in terms of the OK Ethics organization and why it was felt that this would be a good program to have. I think sharing best practices and helping each other along. This is not about, oh, let's all compete and see who's best, you know, and that type of thing. The organization is really focused on helping us all learn and continue to learn and grow and sustain our ethical approach. Have any of you not been to one of the luncheons? So then you know how good they are. And I'm not just talking about the food, but the speakers. I mean, I believe that the programs are really excellent, and I've always, sometimes I might say, I don't know, what does this mean to me? But the individuals have always been just very, very interesting and brought a lot of thoughtful conversation, I think, certainly to me, thought-provoking things that have been very helpful to me. So I think the Compass Award is just another extension of that. And I think my experience in the organization has been, we do share these thoughts, as Shannon mentioned. It's to our benefit as individuals, it's to the benefit of our own organizations, it's to the benefit of our community and our state that we all work together and that we all build each other up in any way that we can, but certainly in these types of areas where we can help to, you know, and again, generationally, you do this in your families, you pass things down, your own values and that type of thing. You don't just assume that by osmosis your children are going to learn what your values are. You know, you have some responsibility to reach out and teach that. And I think in the workplace we have the same thing. We can't just assume that everybody has the same experiences that we do, but they can benefit by our thoughts on that. And Shannon mentioned this a little bit, but you know, promoting and sharing the of best practices, and that's a little bit about what we want to do today, but that doesn't all have to come from the front of the room. You all will have some areas of best practices that you might want to share with the group as well. Inspiring the trust, you know, of our consumers and our shareholders. We all know how important that is. Again, can't take it for granted. We need to be focused on that. The reputations of our businesses are very, very critical. It takes a long time to build that up. It doesn't take long to destroy it, and it's much harder to recover from that sometimes than it is that it was to create it to begin with.
I might pitch in a little bit there too on reputations. As was mentioned, I work at OGE Energy Corp, and Carla actually worked with me when we developed the ethics program over there originally. And at a big company, big public company, we had some challenges back when a few of our companies in the public eye started misbehaving, such as Enron and WorldCom and all that. And we had the challenge like 10 years ago of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2004, where we had to do a lot of stuff to get our corporate governance back up to where it should be. And that's because Enron misbehaved. They were naughty, and so was WorldCom, and it was bad. But anyway, we know all that, and we've seen, actually, OK Ethics has had the controller from WorldCom come in and talk about what happened and the pressures there at WorldCom. But a lot of companies are not in the public eye, but what we had to go through was this. We had all these rules and regulations that we had to look at, and we said, are we going to like put down a bunch of rules and regulations, or what are we going to do? And we as a team, and Carla was on that team, we decided, hey, we're going to, we want to go beyond just complying with the regulation. We want to make this really mean something, because like she talked about the reputation. Reputation's important, and when Enron, the stuff was leaking out that they cheated obviously, the reputation was hurt. I worked for a firm during most of my career called Arthur Andersen. Their reputation was hurt because they audited Enron and WorldCom. Just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, but they also, I think they slipped a little bit too, personally. So anyway, we decided to go beyond just compliance, and we, you know, we really tried to, like in the training, we tried to get our people in the training to like focus on awareness. Like ethics is not, you know, you know, black and white. Sometimes it's gray, and we want people asking questions, wondering, and all that. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there, that for us at OGE, the reputation was one of the things, and I know at your firms too, reputation's a big deal because you want people focused on doing the right things. We do too, but we also want people focused on sending in questions. If they ever wonder if they're out there on a limb, send in those questions. And this whole process of going through this application was kind of eye-opening for us because, you know, the beauty of it is you go through the application and you're really testing yourself, because you're saying, how do we lead with integrity, you know, and that type of thing. So I think this is it's a really good opportunity, but, you know, it's going to be different. Like if you're a private organization, if you're smaller, it's all going to be, it's all different. We all have to, so there's no cookie cutter way to do this, as I would say as well.
I do want to point to a little bit on page 5 in the little box. This is something that Shannon stressed with me when we talked about the award applications, and certainly I saw it in the other examples of applications that I was able to look at. Supporting documentation. You've got to have supporting documentation. And again, it can be somewhat intimidating sometimes because you think, well, I don't know, we don't do that exactly like that, the way that question's asked. But, you know, don't think in too limited a way about what all in your organization is in place that really does contribute to each of these areas. And as you see some of our examples, it may spur some of that thinking about what might fit there. But, you know, real concrete, practical, everyday application of these areas focus that are being asked about that you can point to. And then Shannon has mentioned OG&E had some of the best examples of how do we know if it's working? Okay, you can throw a lot of stuff out there, but how do you know if it's working? Are people getting the message? Do they understand it? Are we seeing results from it? And sometimes, again, that can be intimidating because, you know, we can't all necessarily do some big formal survey type process, but there are ways that you can reach out and find out what's working and what's not working, get feedback. Again, and do you have questions now, or if you want to follow up with some questions on that, especially after maybe we've gone through some of the examples, then we'll be happy to do that. So we'll kind of delve into now some of the sections of the application. Again, we've got the excerpts in here, and should have enough for you to see where we're headed here. The first area is leading with integrity, and I'm going to let Gary.
Okay. This is, if you look at tab 1 in that booklet that was passed out, and after I talk about this tab 1 thing, I'm going to also maybe put out the applications that these big ones, that we'll put them out and then maybe let you pass them out during this so you could kind of see how this works. But you see under tab 1, you see this is from our application in 2012. It says leading with integrity at the top of the page. And you see it says, you have 2 pages that look just like that. It's, you know, it's kind of like got the little blue stuff, and then it has discussion, then a little blue. The blue fonted items come directly from the application. That was something that was in the application, and then in black font, that was kind of our response to that. And you can see that if you look at the application. Now, we didn't print out all the parts but you can see that that's what we're doing, that we're responding to it. Now, there's one thing that I didn't notice in the application until I was getting close to the end, and it says, limit your response to 2 pages. I didn't notice that but somebody in our corporate communications did, and they said, oh, you got to limit. I didn't know. I was going like way too crazy. And actually, it was helpful because it cut back on some of my responses, which just went on and on. So anyway, you want to really look at that application. So that's how this works. And so this is kind of like, in my way of looking at it, responding to the questions about leading with integrity in the application. And here's you all have the application. If you turn over to, I'm going to find it in here. This is going to be a test for me. You go back a few pages, and I'm going to find it. Page 6. Nope, that's not where it is. We're going further, we're going deep. We're going deeper, we're going deeper. Here we go. On page 10, you see that where it says leading with integrity. And what we did is we put over here, you know, the first paragraph in bold print says leaders are expected to set the right tone for ethical behavior, to flourish. And then we just kind of left that, we just went ... because we wanted to make sure we could only use 2 pages, so I didn't want to use too much words. So anyway, that's how we did it, and then the questions, question A, how does your company hold managers accountable? You see, how does your, same right here, and that's how we did that. But that's how, now, and what I would call this 2 pages here is, the way I look at this is an executive summary. And so it's an executive summary, and then you see in here that we will refer every once in a while to CB3 or CB4, and then we'll have an attachment, and we'll have an appendix with the B3. So in this particular section, if after those first 2 pages you look at B3, and it's in here, it's right there. It's got this purple thing because I want it to really stand out color-wise. See, I like the color. B3 is, now this is just, see, this is what one of the benefits to us doing the application. We had initiated a leadership program at OGE. The leadership program and what we're doing really tied in with the Leading for Integrity. So it made us think about things that we do within the company that tie into the ethics program, because the way I look at it is good ethics is good management is good ethics. So we have a lot, it helped me understand how broad other things are, helped us. So that's why then we had the B3 in here, and was an example of that tied back to our executive summary. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start this here, and this is OGE's application, and Carla's going to put the Devon application back there, and we'll just let you guys look at it as we're going through the rest of the deal.
Shannon assured me that when it came to the judge, weighing the volume was not part of the
Exactly. It could be a lot different, but it's just an example of what you can do. Now, so anyway, that's kind of like the start of how we did it, the Leading with Integrity. I'm going to refer you to something else, and I'm not sure if this is just an example we happen to have. This would be at the back of tab 2. The very back, you see a document that goes on for 4 or 5 pages, and it's this document here, it says Corpedia, the very back of tab 2. You have it there. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's not, the pages aren't numbered, but this says Corpedia. I'm just going to say that we were lucky because this company had called and offered to look at our code of ethics. Obviously, they wanted to sell us services, but they said, we'll review your code of ethics for free. Of course, then they were going to sell us services after that. We let them look at our, give us an evaluation, and it was, they were very complimentary. And this is the code of ethics that we'll pass out as well. This is our code of ethics. We decided not to focus on rules and legalese, even though our general counsel wants us to have enough of that in there. We decided to focus on awareness, and through awareness training, we wanted people to be aware and ask questions and not, because rules change all the time. We want them to feel open enough and comfortable enough to come forward with questions, and if something doesn't seem right, to come forward rather than just to ask forgiveness after they do something silly. And the other thing I would say is that, again, at OGE, because we're a larger corporation, 3,400 people, we started this survey with an outside party, the Corporate Executive Board, that was a cultural diagnostic. And it helped us put a gauge on things. And Devin does something similar where they do an internal survey. And the other thing we've done, and a lot of companies have done, is this Great Places to Work survey as well. I think in the Great Places to Work surveys that people take part in, you learn about your culture, you learn if there's good communications from people on the line all the way up to management. And when there's not, that's when you get very cautious and concerned of ways you need to open up those communication channels.
And I want to elaborate on Gary's dime, because Gary did a great job, I think, of having this vision of how to do that within an organization and build the culture. And we decided to do some, we said training. Well, you don't train someone to be ethical, right? I mean, if you've ever tried. You do raise awareness, and you have the discussions with people, because it's not just, you can read the code, yeah, we're going to follow every law and we're going to be ethical and we're not, but that doesn't do it. Everybody has that, I guess, especially in a public company. You're required to have that. You got to have a code of ethics,
It didn't make any difference that the guy was from OSU, this Dr. Andy Urich, and we're very good friends now, but at the time, what he did was somebody that could come in and talk not only to our office professionals, but to our people at the power plants. Andy has a unique ability to just be down to earth with everybody, and he got the message across wherever he went. And it was fun to watch the power plant guys, the rough and tough guys, come in, and they'd start off the presentation and they'd just be sitting there with their arms folded, and then he throws in a little humor with his ethics training, and finally, somebody that could get through to all of our workforce. Because like a lot of us, we have a pretty diverse workforce out in the field and that type of thing. So.
And Andy really helped design, I think, the coursework. He used a lot of case studies. So you get people engaged. You just don't sit and preach to them, and put them, do some role play. And think about this stuff. And it was really very, very effective, because he helps you think about rationalization, how we all rationalize, well, that's not really a problem if I do that. But when you start talking through it, and you're talking through it with your peers, you have some aha moments about that. And I just felt it was very, very effective, to raise awareness. As I say, it's not about training, but it's helped people think and reframe things, because sometimes in your life experiences you've seen things happen, or you've been involved with things, and you've had this rationalization where your threshold has been raised a little bit perhaps, but this kind of reset it, I think, and got people to rethink. And one of the outcomes of that was we saw that they would come and ask questions. versus just going ahead and doing things. And that's one of the things that Gary's program encourages people. If you wonder about whether you should do that or not, just give me a call, do that kind of thing. And it made it safe to do that. And I think it was just a very effective way to broach a subject that's not easy necessarily to talk about.
And what we did too on every training session is somebody from management, Carla, myself, or somebody else would be there to introduce Andy and to also answer any questions after the session, because a lot of times people would come up afterwards and say, well, what about this situation? And again, the case studies we had in there was, as an example, for example, if the vice president comes to you, and you're new to the company and ask you to download some company software onto his personal computer, for his kid, do you do it? And that, those type, we went through several case studies like that, so.
Yeah, because you'd think, well, yeah, and they will, especially if you're out in a power plant, where I spent a number of years of my life, learned a lot of things. They're going to say, well, yeah, I do it and you do it too. Because old Joe, he'd fire you if you didn't. Now, that's honest. That's honest. But then you have the conversation about, well, but should you do it? And should you work in an environment where you fear that old Joe's going to fire you if you do that? And the further away we were talking about this the other day in another context, but the further away, the more geographically diverse your organizations are, the further away you get, the more honest people will be, and the more willing they're going to be to put it all out there. Then it was just, if you get sports tickets, and what do you do with them, and should you accept them and all that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But the things that happen, often pretty frequently in the organizations, but then thinking about the implications of that and getting people to really stop for a minute and think about it and consider it, it really did create that opportunity that you don't necessarily have on an everyday basis. And I just think it went a long way in helping establish and reinforce really an environment and a culture of ethics at OG&E at that particular time. Now, can we all go out and hire Andy Urich? Probably not. Are there other ways you can do that? And I think that's what I would really encourage you to do. Don't think, well, I can't do that. We're not as large a company. We don't have the resources to do that. But are there other ways you can do something similar that could be just as effective?
I might just mention, just want to tell you, like in this training sessions we went through, little humor here, just a little humor, because this is ethics, we can't get like real humor. But when Andy was out doing this training and going through these various case studies with people, one of the case studies was, can you take a kickback or whatever? Can you take a little? You didn't call it that. You didn't call it a kickback, but can you take a tip or whatever?
Yeah, it's a Christmas gift.
So we had a case study like that. But one of the people out in Arkansas, we serve a little bit in Arkansas, this lineman said, well, okay, I understand that, Dr. Urich, but now if I turn on somebody's power out there in the country, what about, could I take a pie? I've been offered a pie before. And Andy says, well, I'm not a representative of the company, but it's probably okay to take a pie. And then the guy says, can I take two? so it's a slippery slope, It's.
I say if you get free pie, you take the pie. That's always my philosophy. Yeah. Any foodstuffs. By the way, help yourself to drinks or anything at any time you need it. You're not going to bother us. I have to stay hydrated, and I assume you do too. We've talked already a lot about culture, but I want to continue that. On page 7, there's kind of the excerpt from the application about culture, and I want to just elaborate on a couple of the examples that we included. Again, there's no one single right way to create a process in your company to drive ethical culture. There's a multitude of ways to do that, and we just used what we had. And I think that you be creative about that. I think our organizations are diverse, and I think it needs to be creative and maybe new things added or things changed up as you go to keep it fresh for people. But behind tab 2, here's one of the, you know, policies are boring, I'm sorry, but we were talking about that original code of ethics, and that's how they look. But at Devon, we had created a policy about gifts and entertainment, because again, if you're a large company, or maybe even not a large company, you deal with a lot of vendors, there's a lot of things going on, and these things present themselves, and you want to give direction to people. You don't want to leave it to chance, or leave it to, you know, perhaps their immediate supervisor will direct them appropriately, but what are the guidelines for that? So we not only set the expectations with our workforce, but really we set the expectations with our vendors and the people that we come in contact with too, about, you know, how we feel about those things, because it may not influence us at all. It may not really influence a decision that we make, but it could give that perception. And even to that point, we don't want that perception of anyone to feel internally or externally that, you know, just a little something here or there, again, whether it's Thunder tickets or, you know, a hunting trip or whatever it might be. So we just established some policy around that to give people guidance about it. Again, there's nothing magic about that. You set it the way what works for your own organization. But then also, Devon went a step further and actually has a process in place so that employees are expected to report any of those activities. You know, even if it's within a threshold that wouldn't be disallowed, we want to say, let's just be clear about what activity there is. Because again, if you know, maybe it's a small thing, but they're coming every month, you know, or that type of thing. We just wanted to set that expectation clearly, that we just didn't think that was going to be something that we needed to go on in the organization. Does everybody need to do that? Probably not. You take the path that, you know, that seems appropriate for your organization at the time. But again, relative to culture, setting those expectations and helping people know what's expected. You know, it's funny, you hear people, especially in the world we live in today, and you hear all these crazy stories about things that go on, and we're shocked many times. I know I am if I'm watching the news and you think, how could, you know, this person do that thing? And we can't relate to that. But everybody has different experiences in their life and their own set of values and their own set of, you know, parameters about what's allowed and what's not allowed. And again, in a large corporate organization, you're dealing with, you know, outsiders. You want everybody in your company to give the right impression to people that they encounter. And so you want to help them know what that means and not just leave it to chance. And then there's a little bit of information about the Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For. Devon's very honored and proud to have been on that list a few times in recent years. It's no small feat, and it is something that it's not just about, you know, there's a lot of recognition for companies that's, you know, about financial things and results that they get in that way. This particular one takes a lot of other things into perspective as well. And, you know, it does rely a lot on the employee survey that's a part of that process, asking about what's it really like to work for this company and what really, you know, goes on here. And a lot of that is really about the culture of that organization and the leadership and the tone that they set and such. So I think, again, we just simply use this as an example of how do we know it's working? You know, how are we getting feedback by, you know, this is completely anonymous. You know, we don't pay people to take the survey. We don't reward them if we come out fortunately on top. But it does, you know, employees are, I don't know how many have had experience with employee surveys. They're honest. They will be honest. They will say things from their perspective, their seat on the bus, how things are going and what's working and what's not working, what bothers them, you know, what keeps them up at night and that type of thing. So I think it's pretty meaningful that aspect of the survey comes from employees. So there's just a little bit of information to give you an insight into why we felt like that was representative of what was working in the culture at Devon. And then following those 3 pages, and we don't do these every year, but we used an example of an employee ethics survey. You know, and again, it was to how's it working? Is it working? The program had been in place, and we didn't put anything in this book about hotlines, but both Devon and OG&E has employee hotlines. They can do it by phone. They can do it on online. To report things that they have a concern about. And we get those reports, and Gary does, and I think he may talk a little bit about that process that he has responsibility for managing. But what do you know, is it working? And so you ask him, you know, some of these questions. I can report ethical behavior, you know, without fear of retaliation, because again, that's there sometimes. If they think, well, no, you say that, but I'm concerned about, you know, retribution, for example, if I were to report something. But, you know, we both have examples where things have been discovered and then rectified, and we wouldn't, you know, the companies wouldn't necessarily have the ability to do that unless employees are willing to be honest and make those things known.